Welcome to the 2022 version of the Everything Policy Program. Welcome to Las Vegas. For a lot of you, it's welcome back to Las Vegas. It's been 6 years since we were here, and it's been a great 6 years for wireless and especially for 5G. As we heard this morning, 6 years ago, 5G was a dream, and now we cover the nation. We have, in the last 3 years alone, we have increased download speeds by a factor of 3. We are connecting students to teachers, patients to doctors, robots to factory floors, AR, VR. We are helping solve the nation's climate goals. And given our venue, I should add that now with wireless, you can gamble from anywhere. But we are at CTIA, of course, always focused on policy. And we're going to spend the next couple of days talking about how wireless can close the digital divide, how we're keeping our networks safe and secure, how the wireless industry is promoting diversity and equity and inclusion, and how wireless and spectrum policy is key to everything. And speaking of being key to everything, I am thrilled to introduce our guest keynote speaker, Scott Harris. Scott, as we just heard, is the Senior Spectrum Advisor at NTIA. What that means is he is the most senior official in the Biden administration exclusively responsible for spectrum policy, and that's why he's perfect for this keynote speech, and he's the perfect guy for the job. I've known Scott for over 20, yeah, it's a long time. We didn't start, about mid-career, 25 years ago, we ended up at the FCC together. Scott launched and was the first chief of the International Bureau, which was deemed by the then chairman of the FCC as the best dressed bureau. Some things never change. Scott went on to found and lead one of the premier telecom firms in the country. He was the general counsel of the Energy Department during the Obama administration. He is the consummate professional. He is smart and knowledgeable and meticulous. He is an open book, and he has an open door, not just for us, but for everyone in the stakeholder community, which is just a great sign for good government. And he's going to be on point for the National Spectrum Strategy and for coordinating the federal agencies when it comes to freeing up spectrum, and especially that valuable mid-band spectrum that's so important to our industry and so important to our nation. So please join me in welcoming my good friend, Scott Blake Harris.
So Tom told me he didn't have time to stick around to hear what I have to say, so take that as a sign. Thank you for inviting me here today, CTIA. I'm actually honored to be here with all of you. But Tom, in fact, may have screwed up in inviting me. I'm not joking. I've been with NTIA just a month, and this is the first time they've let me out in public. So my primary goal here today is not to screw up. And to that end, I do not wish to say anything newsworthy, which may not be ideal for a keynoter, I'm not sure. In any case, in an effort not to make news, I think I'm going to spend my time telling you things you already know. Why am I doing that? Because these are things that I think are not said out loud as often as they should be. And they're often not said together. And I think if you say them out loud and you say them together, you may begin to see a narrative forming. So if the Department of Commerce had to say it had one mission, and it has many, but if it's one single mission, I think it would be to enhance American competitiveness so that US workers and US companies could succeed in the global economy today, tomorrow, and for decades to come. A large element of achieving that mission, of achieving that goal, is going to be ensuring that there's sufficient spectrum for private sector advanced wireless networks and services, both for the ongoing 5G rollouts and for future 6G development and deployment, which we're already talking about. So we are going to find that spectrum. Not finding that spectrum would be wholly unacceptable, full stop. Look, I believe we lead the world in the innovative use of private sector spectrum, and we will not allow that to change. But it's equally true that government use of spectrum is key to our national security, our public safety, and to our economic security. Government spectrum is needed to track enemy missiles and aircraft, and in appropriate circumstances, shoot the damn things down. Government spectrum is necessary to prepare for life-threatening weather events, to protect police, to protect firefighters, and to protect civilians. It turns out government spectrum is necessary to guide rockets into asteroids so they don't destroy the Earth. Who knew? And so it's important stuff. And while perhaps not as important as saving the Earth from an asteroid, government spectrum is also needed to enable other sectors of our economy, the transportation sector, the aviation sector, the electric power sector, which was a favorite of mine when I was at DOE, and other sectors of our economy. Two other things worth noting about government uses of spectrum. Number one, like our private sector uses of spectrum, some government uses of spectrum are very, let me underscore that, very advanced. Like, I can't talk about it, or at least can't talk about some of it advanced. Second, as the private sector keeps inventing new technology and new uses for that technology, the government sector is actually doing pretty much the same thing. So, did I mention we are going to find the spectrum the private sector needs? We are. So why am I talking about this other stuff? I'm talking about it mostly so that you'll understand that finding the spectrum we need is not a trivial task. And so that I hope you will agree that it is important that we get it right. Look, who wants to be responsible for an asteroid hitting the Earth, right? We don't want that on our conscience. I don't. So I also talk about these other uses of spectrum so that you'll understand that increasingly spectrum will have to be shared. Not because anyone is being difficult or churlish, not because government officials don't get it. I think most of us do. But it's because there's important stuff happening all over the spectrum and you can't see all of it. So, what is the plan for finding new spectrum aside from waking up at 4 a.m. and worrying about it? Another element of my new job, by the way. We are going to develop a forward-looking spectrum strategy designed to find spectrum for new licensed, unlicensed, private sector, government, and shared uses. We're going to begin the effort by seeking public input. Your thoughts and those of your colleagues across the sector are going to be the driving force in this effort. We are then going to continue the process by working with our colleagues all across the government. We are going to identify bands that you tell us will be most valuable for private sector use. And then we are going to study in depth those bands we think are most likely to be able to be made available for that private sector use. We're going to create a pipeline of bands that we think can be put to private sector use in the short, the medium, and the long term. We want to put together a pipeline that'll take us out at least a decade so that we can create some certainty in this process and that we don't have to keep asking the same questions every 2 years. And we're also going to be exploring new technologies and investing in new technologies that will make sharing easier and thus make it easier to create the pipeline we're talking about. We are, for example, working on developing an incumbent informing capability, IIC. Side note, we're crap at branding, so if you have a better name for it, please let us know. We will use it. But the idea of the IIC is that we are going to enable dynamic spectrum sharing among incumbents and new users in ways that are not today possible. Basically, we want to develop a system that can work on a wide variety of bands, allowing incumbents to announce when they're using a channel, and thus let new users access the bands when the incumbents are not using it. So I hope you'll agree this overall approach makes some sense. But I can imagine there's a skeptic or two in the room, I actually know some of them, who will say, yeah, but after the last couple of years, how can we count on anything? Fair point, actually. When I first began doing spectrum stuff at the commission in the mid-90s, folks would literally roll their eyes when I try to explain what it was I did. And I used to think, gee, wouldn't it be great if what I did made it into the news so that folks would understand what I do? Well, as it turns out, be careful what you ask for. I'm asked often by friends not in the sector about my new job. And all I need to do is say 5G cell phones and airplanes, and they get it right away. Speaking of which, that kind of cluster bleep can't happen again. And we are not only doing everything we can with our colleagues in government and our friends in the private sector to resolve this issue finally, and we are going to do that. But we are also working to make sure that the next time a spectrum issue leads the news, it's for good reasons, not bad reasons. Our engineers are now working literally on a day-by-day basis at the technical level with FCC engineers. Our assistant secretary is regularly meeting with the chair of the FCC to talk about future planning and big picture issues. The FCC now participates in the Spectrum Management Advisory Committee that NTIA runs, and NTIA now participates in the Commission's Technology Advisory Council. Stuff you thought we could have done before, but we're doing it now. We've institutionalized this and more by updating the nearly 20-year-old Memorandum of Understanding between our agencies. I have been doing this stuff since 1994, and I gotta tell you, the relationship between the Commission and NTIA and the degree to which the agencies are working together is unlike and better than anything I've ever seen before, and that should make you all feel much more comfortable. And we're doing the same things with our colleagues in the other federal agencies. The bottom line, no more surprises, no more misunderstandings, no more decisions without all of the information decision makers need. So look, as a country, we can ensure that there's enough spectrum to continue to innovate and grow economically, and at the same time to ensure our national security and our public safety is not compromised. And it's not going to be just the folks in the government who are going to make this happen. It's going to be those of you in this room, colleagues of yours in the private sector, but all working all together, we can get it done, and I'm confident we will. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And someone tell Tom what I said. I don't know who's running this show, but I have a couple of minutes, unless we're already running over, to take questions. Who's in charge? Because Tom left. Thank you. Any questions? But keep in mind, I'm only going to be able to tell you what you already know. See one back there.
So you mentioned that within our own government, we're looking at several spectrums allocation. How are you working with international governments to ensure that we have a common spectrum?
Well, so there's this entire, God help us, World Radio Conference process. And we are fully participating in that. There's not a day of the week when someone from NTIA and the Commission, and sometimes both, isn't in some godforsaken place at a meeting talking about stuff I will never hope to understand, to try to get the whole world sort of on the same page. But to be clear how this works, I mean, at least the way I think it should work, is that the US needs to have its own view of where the world should be on a particular spectrum band, on technology, on whatever is at issue. And then the US broadly speaking, and it doesn't mean just the FCC and NTIA. It means DOD, it means the other federal agencies, and it means the private sector members of the ITU who are utterly critical to this all work together to try to encourage the world in that direction. And by the way, over the years, first work I went to, I think, was 95, maybe. I lose track because they're like every 2 years, and then they miss a year, so you can't get the numbers right. In that time, we have been stunningly successful in sharing our vision of the world in terms of spectrum usage and actually competitiveness and a whole bunch of other things. That's because we send these enormous delegations with really top-notch people. Again, one of our strengths, it's not just the government folks who go, it's private sector folks as well, and they're really good at what they do. One more question? Yeah.
How are you thinking about spectrum, making spectrum available for research and testing to do things like avoiding the kerfuffle between the NTIA and the industry and then independent data on how...
Good question. So, number one, I suppose all of you know about ITS, which is NTIA's lab in Boulder, Colorado. It is the gold standard for testing and evaluation of technical issues regarding spectrum and interference. One of the things we hope to do is build ITS up even from where it is today and encourage its use both by government agencies and the private sector to resolve a lot of these issues before they become a kerfuffle. Good word, I like that. Kerfuffles are bad when it comes to spectrum. And also, we will continue to work with our colleagues at the FCC on experimental licenses and things like that, where you can do real-world testing. But among the things we have to get better, and this is not, God knows, not just NTIA, that we as a sector need to get better at is testing and at making those test results available and at sharing them widely and getting the test results done in a way that people don't feel that a thumb is on the scale one way or another. One of the things that's fabulous about ITS, it's got no thumbs on the scale. All right, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.